Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jesse Berger, chairman of Harnett County GOP. I was born in Istanbul, Turkey. I moved to New England when I was 12, joined the Navy at 17, transferred to the Army at 21, did 2 combat deployments with the 82nd and with USASOC before becoming medically retired. Now I'm a father and a business owner, and as I look around, the future that is being left for my children does not have the same freedom and opportunities that I've enjoyed. My brothers still in uniform are fighting based on orders from incompetent leaders. The love for my country runs through my veins, and seeing what's happening is unacceptable. So how do we change our trajectory? How do we inspire our next generations? Well, it begins with getting smart on what the role of our officials should be. Once we have learned what the job is supposed to be, we must then ensure we elect the people that can accomplish the tasks. This is what we will explore with our candidate in this interview. So let me welcome our NC Senate District 12 candidate, David Buboltz. David, thank you for joining me on this call. I'm reminded of our founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, specifically discussing that he felt one of the biggest threats to our country was going to be the day when the most qualified people were unwilling to step up into leadership roles. So I appreciate you stepping up into this role and putting your name in the ring. So let me go ahead and hand it over to you. If I'd like you to introduce yourself to the county and to the district.
Yeah, thanks for having me on this podcast here. My name is David Buboltz. I'm a Christian, a husband, a father of 4. One of them's in the womb now. I'm a business owner and was an 11-year Army officer in the North Carolina Guard. And I just got sick of the lockdowns and the mandates and the vaccine coercion. And a lot of our Republican leadership was just complicit with this stuff. And the way to hold people accountable is to vote in primaries. And that's what I'm doing. There's a number of issues. We can go into it now. I'm following you, but
Sure. So let's go ahead and start off. I mean, obviously, the people that watch this, we're going to have a very large, diverse crowd. Some people will be very aware of the political process. Others have no idea. And one of the things that I've found kind of interesting as chairman is that the baseline knowledge is really, there is no baseline. So if you could kind of take us through kind of start to finish explaining, like maybe to a 5th grader, and then working us through what is a senator, what would your job be? Yeah, go ahead, take it away.
Yep, a senator is a part of one of the branches of government. There's the House and the Senate. They work together to make laws. The governor ratifies that. I mean, we all seen the cartoon, but yeah, that's the gist of it in a nutshell. In the 10-second view is to make laws. My goal is to make laws that align with God's law, because that's our foundation of everything. Jesus made everything, and he's King of Kings, which includes the NC Senate and our North Carolina government. I would say in the voting process, look, voting as a whole is important. Voting in the primaries is really important too. I neglected that most of my life until I started to realize how important it is to pick proper primary candidates. And so if you're listening here, don't make the same mistake I did for most of my life. But this stuff matters, and it matters what type of Republican we're going to get to defend us up at the General Assembly.
So as you talk about defending us and representing the people, obviously one of the questions that comes about is leadership styles. We have a vast amount of differences of opinion on that, and so I'm curious, what is your leadership style, and what do you think is going to be effective?
Man, that's a great question. One, I'm not necessarily the most charismatic guy, and that's fine. That's never really been my leadership style. Sometimes, people follow people, but other times people follow ideas and directions that we're going. And that's the more powerful direction to go. I mean, do you really care about me? Or do you care about what we're going to do and what we're going to accomplish? Like, it's not about me. It's about what we're going to do up there in the Senate. And so that's always been my leadership style. I never really liked the focus on me, even on all our campaign materials. I don't even like my face being on things, because it's not about me. It's about what we need to do, what's critical to accomplish, and us getting the job done. So leadership style, I guess you could say, yeah, trailblazer, like this is the way I think we need to go. This is where I'm going. I think y'all should come with me, but you make your own decision, but I'm going this way. I'm open to being persuaded. I'm certainly open to being persuaded through scripture, which I have totally reversed my opinions on a lot of things through being persuaded, but I've got to understand, hey, this is the right way. This is what God says. And then we got to go do it. Let's go make it happen. And I just got sick of complaining. It's not right to complain and not do anything. It's like, look, you see a guy whose car's broken down on the side of the road, and if he's just sitting there with his arms crossed with the hood popped open, no one helps him. But if he's like actively pushing his car as hard as he can to get off the end of the shoulder, people jump in and people help. So like the thing to do is just to do it and make progress and make momentum, and people join in on that momentum, especially when we're looking at ideas, movements, cultural changes, cultural shift is all predicated on ideas. And we want the right biblical ideas at the forefront. And so as a leader, I always want to be pointing to that, and not pointing to me or who I am or what I did. Or it's not about that.
So one of the questions that I have for you is, there's a lot of different leaders that once they take over things, they feel as though they have to exercise power. And one of the observations that I believe I've made correctly is that we need to have leaders that understand when not to exercise their authority and their power. So I guess the question is, one, do you agree that there is a time and there are certain things that the government should exercise authority over, and there are some things that the government should absolutely stay out of? And where do you draw those lines?
Yep. Well, where does authority come from? That's what you first have to figure out. A lot of people don't really think this one through. Again, most of my life, I didn't really have a good foundation on that. It's not kind of a willy-nilly thing. Where do we ultimately derive our authority from? We could say the Constitution, which is true. Okay, that gives the boundaries and the confines of the government. The Constitution was not written for the citizens. We don't get our rights given to us by the citizens. The Constitution is the bounds, the box in which government cannot step out of. And so the Constitution was written for us. Look, you take an oath to support and defend the Constitution. If you haven't worked for the government or been in a government position or on behalf of the government, you don't swear an oath to the Constitution because it's not for you. It's not meant to restrain you. It's meant to restrain the government. And that's critical. But there's a higher level to that. God's the boss. We must obey God rather than men. The Constitution is only as good in as much as it follows God's law. Like, I'm a father, and a husband. I'm the head of my household. If I go tell my wife to go rob a bank, she's not supposed to obey me, even though Scripture says to obey me in everything. I'm outside. I've now stepped out of the God-ordained authority that He has given a father, and that is no authority whatsoever. And so you go into Romans 13. And my understanding of Romans 13 flipped on its head a couple years ago, when it says all authority is instituted by God, so obey them, essentially. Thinking, wow, we got to obey all this tyrannical stuff. No, what it's saying is the only authority that is instituted by God is proper and right authority. So in as much God gives authority, that is a legitimate authority. When you step outside of those bounds, that is no authority whatsoever. And there's no obligation to obey. In fact, oftentimes there's a duty to disobey. And just as it would be the duty of a wife to disobey a husband if he said go rob a bank, or a child to go rob a bank. No, it's a duty to disobey because there's a higher law, which is God's law. So understanding the confines of government is critical, because I'll tell you this, if you don't have that limiting factor, it's human nature to take more and more and more and more. And if you don't have God's law at the center restraining you and your authority, all roads lead to tyrants, all roads. Because if it's not God, it's humanistic. And sinful man is corruptible and wants to gain more and more and more power. So I would say if someone doesn't have a good understanding of the limits of the Constitution, but more importantly, the limits of what God ordains governments to have, then this is a recipe for disaster.
And it's interesting that you bring up a lot of the religious items and aspects of the conversation, because let me just find my reference here. But back in August 23rd of 1831, there was an article in the Spectator out of New York where a presiding judge remarked that he was unaware that there was a man living who did not believe in the existence of God, and that this belief constituted the sanction in law, that which gives binding force of all testimony in a court of justice, and that he knew of no case in a Christian country where a witness had been permitted to testify without such belief. So considering that we came from not very long ago, a society where judges outright refused to let someone's testimony be heard in court because they didn't believe in God, to a society where now we have intertwined all sorts of different religions, different ideologies, and different belief systems. So as a senator, obviously you're going to be representing more than just a small group of people. What would you say to those folks that have contrary belief systems or foundational belief systems in terms of letting them know how the leadership style that you're going to take and your values are beneficial to them and not going to trample on their rights?
Yeah. Well, first, God's law is actually very freeing. And it's why I'm essentially have a lot of libertarian thinking, because I actually believe God's law is libertarian. Look, it says, thou shalt not steal. That means all other means of gaining wealth is legal and right and just. God says, thou shalt not bear false witness. That means there's no other restrictions on speech. It's free speech. So understanding that's where I'm coming from is actually very freeing for all people. I would say too, is if someone's not a Christian, that doesn't mean they're not moral. I just think that they ultimately, God wrote his laws on every man's heart. And that's where those paintings of morality come from. But yeah, we are a diverse country and state and District 12 and Harnett County and we all can live together. And I think having really a libertarian mindset goes a long way towards making that happen.
Well, I appreciate you explaining a lot of that, and I feel like it did a really good job of explaining, the job, and I feel like given us a lot of who you are and how you're going to do things. So I very much appreciate that, and would like us to kind of transition to the next segment here, which is, what do you think are the 3 biggest issues facing our district, and what are your proposed solutions?
Yeah. So, thinking about the district versus the state, and I was trying to really figure out, the lines are really blurred between those two. in my mind. Like a lot of things that's needed in the state is needed in our district, and a lot of things that are needed in our district are needed in the state. So, I mean, we can start going through them, but I think they actually kind of apply to both. It is, I fundamentally view that government should be closest to the people. So we have city governments and county governments for a reason. We have county commissioners, we have county governments, we have city governments. So I don't want to, be stepping on their toes. I remember being in the Army, you always being a young lieutenant making mistakes. And, the sergeants know how to run things in the Army a lot, And
Yes.
so I kind of had to learn that lesson that, hey, look, I need to stay in my lane and they stay in theirs, and it works great. It works great. And so, I kind of view a lot of the county issues that way. Like I'm obviously representing District 12 and want District 12's issues, but there are certain and proper channels. And most of those direct county channels are through county government. So that's kind of my foundation there. But we can certainly go into them. These are all very weighty and important, and I hesitate to weigh them in order, although some of them I think are weightier matters than others, but they're all very important. So I don't want to distract from these. And these issues are not either or; they're a both and. There's so much we have to tackle, but I would say from top down, abolish abortion. There's a genocide going on. It's the leading cause of death in this state. 1 out of 4 people get murdered before they're born in North Carolina. It is a literal genocide. We have to end it. Next thing is medical freedom and privacy. We all saw the lockdowns and the mandates and the vaccine coercion. We can never allow this to happen again. I mean, we're facing right down the barrel of a medical apartheid, to parallel societies of vaxxed versus unvaxxed and all kinds of unholy alliance with government coercion. And we cannot allow that to ever happen again. I mean, they shut down our churches. Our Republicans allowed that to happen, by the way. We can never allow this to happen. That's clear violation of the Constitution. Talk about God's law, right? Also, they're guilty for that. Then we need constitutional concealed carry. And these are overview. I kind of want to get into the details of these, but there's now 25 states that have constitutional concealed carry. There's about to be 30 next year. And why are we not one of them? I mean, we're falling behind. And by the way, constitutional concealed carry is a step. We need to regain all of our right to bear arms. This is the first step, the first way that we're going to actively take ground. We're no longer playing defense. We need school choice. Look, CRT threatens to destroy an entire generation, cultural Marxism. We got transgenderism in the schools, literally God-hating indoctrination of our children. How do we fix this? Well, we could have a top-down mentality of fixing all these issues, a centralized mentality of the government explicitly hitting each one of these micro issues, which I don't really want to do because I don't want to give more power to the government. What we need to do is inject the free market into education and allow the parents to decide what's best for their children. And the parents will decide how their children get educated. And we can do that through allocating funds per child and letting the parents decide where that child goes. And those funds follow the child, whether it's public, private, or homeschool. The free market will sort it out. By the way, it'll be better for teachers too. Teachers work hard, work a long time, and don't get paid enough. My mother was a public school teacher for 35 plus years in one of the largest public schools in America. I've seen all this firsthand. And you know what? A government bureaucracy is not efficient in doing that. private schools will spend almost half the amount of dollars and get fantastic God-fearing educations. Why? It's the free market. You let the free market decide. We're libertarians, right? I mean, we're the party of freedom. Let's let freedom happen. So then we need election integrity stuff too. I mean, that's critical. So, I mean, we can go into how election integrity stuff needs to happen and how we secure elections, but dang, that's a serious one too. So there's no silver bullet, by the way. There's 4 ways that fraud can happen in elections. There's who can vote, who voted, how they voted, and how they're compiled, how that data is compiled. Fraud happens different ways in each of those 4 categories. You know, we say, hey, we want voter ID. Yeah, voter ID is good, but you know what? That hits only number 2, who voted. Elections can be stolen a whole other ways, and there's problems with voter ID too. So like, all I'm saying is I'm for voter ID. I'm not against that, but I'm just saying, let's not just hold this one thing up and say we're good. We have to really analyze all facets of how fraud happens and have a comprehensive measure to defend our elections. If we don't have that, we don't have a democracy, right?
On that topic, you know, something that comes up quite frequently in the party is doing forensic audits. So I'm curious as to your thoughts on doing audits of the 2020 election, and moving forward, what your thoughts are.
Yeah, why would someone be against it?
Well, you'd be surprised on the reasons, but I want to keep it with you. So, I mean, if that's the simple answer of yes, then that's good enough for me.
Isn't transparency a good thing, especially when it comes to elections? All right, trust but verify. Right?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, that's an overview. I think those 5 things apply to both our county and the state. And oh man, which one do you want to go into first?
Well, I would like to actually dig into a little bit of the abolition stance. Specifically, I'd like to point out a other side of the coin, if you will, which
Sure.
is that on one hand, we're seeing this genocide.
Yep.
On the other hand, you're also seeing birth rates dropping below what is the sustainable level for a civilization, to the point where even liberals are calling out the fact that our birth rate is extremely low. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on how we got to this point. And obviously, it's one thing to stop abortions, but it's another thing when people aren't even having children anymore. So I'm just curious as to if you see a correlation between the two, if you believe that they're both problems, and just get your thoughts on that overall.
I mean, obviously, killing children before they're born is tied to lower birth rates, right? I mean, and by the way, it's like 27 or 28,000 children who are killed in North Carolina every year. That's 1 out of 4 who are murdered in the womb in North Carolina. But those numbers aren't even accurate. Those are mostly surgical abortions. There's really not good tabs on chemical abortions, which are by far and large the largest killer. And then that doesn't talk about Plan B, which kills children. It's over the counter, right? It's in every CVS, Walgreens, and Walmart. No data on that. We could get into how chemical birth control thins the lining of the uterus, so that when a newly conceived child takes 5 to 7 days to travel down the fallopian tube and then finds its mother, who has chemically altered her body so that her womb cannot feed and nourish that child, and that child dies. We can talk about IVF, where typically they'll take between 20 and 30 eggs, fertilize them all. They will grade them to figure out which ones are stronger. They'll kill about half of them, discard them. They'll implant a couple into the mother, and then they'll freeze the rest of them in cryogenic prison. These are human beings. Indefinitely, while the mother's in her childbearing years, in case she wants to use more. But then after she's out of her childbearing years, what happens to these children in cryogenic prison? There's literally millions of children frozen, locked up in cryogenic prison. I mean, you want to talk about this is all encompassing. It is pervasive in our society. Look, when I say genocide, I do not say that lightly. I view this as a prophetic call to repentance for what we've done and what we've allowed to transpire. I mean, there's a church on every street corner in North Carolina. How is it possible that there is blood literally running down our streets? We have not failed to be Republican. We have not failed to be pro-life. We have failed to be Christian. And we have failed to love our neighbors as ourselves. How would you want your senator to act if you were being taken away to the slaughter? If you were scheduled to be ripped apart? I'm saying, Jesse, how would you feel if you were scheduled to be ripped apart limb from limb or be sucked through a vacuum hose tomorrow? How would you want your senator to act? Would you want him to say, oh, look, I'm not doing anything to stop that, but you know what? I'll give chemical birth control to the youth across the state in the pharmacy bill? Because that's what we got right now. And if it sounds like I'm a little upset about it, it's because I am. Because this is really happening. This is our response. The Republican response for 49 years has been to incrementally regulate our way out of this. It's not what God says. I'm here to abolish, not regulate killing children. Our laws it's very simple. Our laws should just apply equally to all human beings, regardless of age or regardless of anything else of that matter. We need to have impartiality in our criminal code. If I strangle my 2-year-old, what happens? I get charged with murder. Should I? Is that too hard? I mean, I did murder someone, right? Now there's got to be evidence. There's got to be a trial. There are degrees of murder. There is such a thing as coercion, but my wife's going to leave me is not coercion. And so why all of a sudden, when it's a 2-month-old in the womb, we have different laws? Is that not a human being? In fact, they're more innocent than a 2-year-old. The 2-year-old's innocent. These are even more innocent. We are in trouble. I'm telling you, we are in trouble. Our laws just I want equal justice for all human beings. And you know what politicians have said, our current politicians and our politicians going 5 decades back? You know what they say? Hey, look, we have to compromise on this or we'll get nothing done. I'm telling you, that's a lack of faith. I know a God who controls every molecule on this planet, and he controls the hearts and minds of kings. The results belong to God. He fights our battles. Is it us fighting our battles with our craftiness and compromise? Or did Gideon kill the Amorites or whoever they were with 300? We don't need, did Jonathan and his armor bearer go into battle? 2 guys. Why? They trusted that the Lord was fighting their battles. So it's a lack of faith when someone says we have to compromise on God's word in order to make something happen. I say the pro-life movement has failed for 5 decades because they have failed to be God honoring. That's why God hasn't honored it. So where does it say, look, pro-life laws in North Carolina says, look, you cannot kill a child over 20 weeks old, but you can kill a child under 20 weeks old if the hallways are wide enough and if you wait 72 hours after counseling. Look at last year's pro-life laws. These are our current senators. Hey, you cannot kill a child if you say it's because they have Down syndrome. Now, you can kill a Down syndrome child. You just can't say it's because they have Down syndrome. That's where we're at. That's last year. That's what they tried to do last year. Are you kidding me?
Well, it's definitely a deep issue, and it's definitely something that I think it warrants and requires.
Born Alive Protection Act came out of the Senate last year. Said if there's a child who's born alive, you can't kill them. Guess what? You already can't kill a born child? Seriously. What does that law do?
Right. Well, like I said, there's
a circus. It's a circus, and it needs to end. And it ends when I'm up in the Senate. I'm not backing down. We're going to do the right thing. We're going to press the issue. And look, hey, when liberals are up there, liberals hold the line, and they make us compromise with them, and they move the Overton window their way. And we sit here, play defense, and say, okay, what can we not give away? I'm done with that compromise. We hold the line, we make them compromise with us, and then we don't take the compromise. We hold the line.
Real quick, since we're running out of time here, I'd like you to just quickly, maybe in a minute or so, touch on the school issue, because that is also a hot button issue right now. So maybe if you could give us a minute or so response on schools.
Yep, and I also want to hit medical freedom and privacy too. Let's not forget that one.
Well, we're running really low on time because we spent about.
Well, let's do both.
All right, go ahead.
So, like I said, schools, right? Well, medical freedom and schools are actually kind of tied together with all the masks and stuff. By the way, it was illegal to wear masks in North Carolina since the 70s. And do you know who repealed the anti-mask law? Our Senate Republicans. You can look it up. It was illegal to wear masks in North Carolina. Our Senate Republicans repealed that law. And now they say, oh, Roy Cooper's the bad guy. Look, you enabled it. And then, by the way, they do the Free the Smiles Act, saying like, hey, look, we're doing a good thing in protecting you, which literally, I got it right here. The Free the Smiles Act says it makes wearing masks normative. It says if you're a parent, you can opt out annually. So wearing masks is normative. And if you're a parent, you want to opt out of that, you have to opt out each and every year. Like, that's not protection for our children. I mean, these are our children in our schools who are minors. Oh, and by the way, it says this law only applies as long as there's no state, local law, rule, or policy that conflicts with it. So a school board could just make a policy that conflicts with it and the school board wins. So this is a neutered farce, okay? So again, if it sounds like I'm upset, it's because I'm trying to defend our children here. This is our future generations.
Passion, I think, is good. I believe that there's a misconception that someone that gets passionate about an issue is being emotional or is irrational. And I disagree with that. I believe that people that act like robots are usually robots. So no apologies ever needed for being passionate. It's much appreciated.
And so real simply with schools, right? We all pay taxes. And our school funds come from our property taxes and our income taxes. Now, if you educate your child yourself at home or in a public school, you're paying for two educations. Taxation is theft. It really is when you really come down to it. So it is so critical to fight all these ills: CRT, cultural Marxism, transgenderism, godless indoctrination. Okay, you will never eradicate these ideas from the public schools. What we have to do is not have the government have a monopoly on education. I think we can all agree that monopolies are bad. Monopolies lead to the way worse than a free market solution. And we need the free market to work, and we need to give the choice back into the hands of parents who know their children the best. And allocating funds per child and letting the parents decide where that child goes and where those funds go is critical to that.
Well, we are out of time, but before we go, if you could just let everyone know how to get a hold of you, where your information is located.
Yep. Buboltz4nc.com. Buboltzfornc. Buboltz4nc.com. We got tons of information there. We've got videos. We've got really good videos that kind of dictate. I've got 3 different videos that have overview. We dive into the abolition stuff. There's tons of resources there. Contact me. You want to get a hold of me? Send me an email. Call me. As much time as God allows, I answer this thing. So, and by the way, I'm going to continue that. Look, you're a citizen of District 12. When I'm up there in Raleigh, you need to be able to contact your senator. And so I want to be open and accessible, and that starts now. So you want to hear something? Shoot me an email, give me a call. Buboltz4nc. We are at a critical time in our nation's history. And I know people always say that, but it is actually true this time. And I believe that there's still hope. We can still pull our country back. I wouldn't be talking to you here if I didn't really believe that. You see that they're lying to us all the time. And then I realized they're still lying to us. They have to lie to us. Why? Because our actions matter. You think they want to go through all this effort and for all this propaganda to institute their policies? Of course not. So your vote counts, your action counts, and we still actually can take the initiative, take our country back, take our state back. And that's critical, by the way. Most of our actions are affected at the state level. I'm so excited to be in a state race because our freedoms are absolutely start at the state level. And that's the way to push the feds back, by the way, is you have a state that has a backbone, pushes back on them, and assert state sovereignty that's given to us in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. Well, the 10th Amendment, but the federal government needs to stay in Article 1, Section 8, and all other issues belong to the states, which is a lot.
Right on. Well, David, thank you very much. I appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you on the campaign trail and afterwards.
Hey, thanks for having me on the podcast, and it was good seeing you.